All right. So how is everyone doing out there? I hope everyone's well. And last week we took a week off for Adobe Max. But we are continuing with the Fresco drawing that we did last week. Last week we spent the entire time inside of Fresco. This week is part 2 of that. We're going to take the document from Fresco into Photoshop and save it as a local Photoshop document. And from there, we are going to open it up in Animate and rig it properly. So this is a kind of a spooky Halloween series. We got a spooky character. I got some spooky music playing, and I kind of mentioned last time maybe what the album was, but the album is mine. So 6 threads, an early morning letter displaced. So have a look for that if you are interested. So the first thing we're going to do inside of here is have a look in Photoshop. So here's Photoshop, and I've got all my cloud documents. You can look at any of your cloud documents here. And the cool thing is it doesn't only bring in your cloud documents from Photoshop on iPad, it'll also bring in any of your cloud documents from Fresco, because they share pretty much the same document type. You've got, a PSDC, which is a Photoshop document cloud document. And you can see right here, here's my creeper work in progress. And all I'll need to do is just kind of open that up. However, I've already opened him up in here. So this is what it looks like. And I've saved him down as a PSD file. So any cloud-based document you have, you can always do a file save as from Photoshop on the desktop and save it as a local PSD, which is pretty neat. So what I'm going to do here is, let's keep an eye on my stream here, make sure everything's cool. Everything looks good. So this is the little guy we made last time inside of Fresco. And, I used some charcoal brushes, and what we did, you can see over on the side here, is we actually have a separate pixel layer for each and every body part that we're going to make part of this rig. So as I go through here, I can see, by turning the visibility off, which body parts that we're dealing with. And of course, inside of Fresco, this all shows up as just pixel layers when you're doing charcoal brushes. But here we can actually give it some names if we wanted to. I'm not going to name each one. It's going to be obvious what they all are. Well, I don't know. Maybe I will name each one. That's something that, I always tell my students, name your Photoshop layers. So let's see. This would be the left foot, right? So foot L. And we got our right foot here. So foot R. And yeah, this will make things a little easier. So lower leg left. And that's the right, yeah. So as I'm doing this, how is everyone's pre-Halloween plans going? Does anybody even trying to do anything for Halloween this year? Upper leg left. I'm not usually a big Halloween person in terms of the holiday itself, but I do like, the aesthetic around things, right? Hey, Matt. Yes, I am going to use the bone tool. I'm going to rig this guy up really nicely inside of Animate with the bone tool. I'm going to rig him up proper. Here's the little gourd head. I'm actually going to call it a gourd head because that's hilarious. Gourd head. I think I spelled that wrong. G-O-U. Yeah, there we go. Gourd head. Then we got the upper left arm. So U, arm, upper arm, L for left. And I use copy and paste a lot when I'm going through and naming different layers like this because it's so damn tedious, right? But it's worth it in the end because actually when this translates into Adobe Animate, you know, it can come in and my layers will be labeled what the layers are here. So it's going to be really easy to be able to identify these things inside of Animate when I do that. So this is the lower arm right. So L arm underscore R. I'm going to guess this is L arm left. Let's see. No, it's not. This is my upper arm right. So we gotta fix that. This is what happens with assumptions, right? It's not good. This one is hand, the left hand. Yeah. Hand, L. This fellow here is the lower arm, left. And yeah, I mean, I created all of these different bits and pieces, of course, inside of Fresco on their own layers so that when we bring it into Photoshop, when we bring it into Animate, it can really be pretty seamless. This is his big torso. And gosh, am I missing a hand here? Oh, there's the hand. Oh yeah, so that's a hand right there. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Hand right. Let's go through this here. So here's my head. We've got our left upper arm, right upper arm. That's not true at all. That's my hand right. Yep. Left lower arm right. Yes. Upper arm right. Yes. Hand left. All right, it looks like we're good. It's just, it got a little squirrely because I probably drew these layers differently. So as I said, I already saved this as a PSD file on my local file system here. So what I'm gonna do is have a look at the coloring. So inside of Fresco, we get the background layer. So we can see immediately like, hey, if I bring this into Animate right now, like it is, all of these things are going to come in, but they're not going to have any sort of colorization or background to them. So let's go ahead and fix that. So inside of Photoshop, I'm going to choose my brush tool. And that looks like a pretty good sized brush there. Let's go ahead and change my foreground color. So he's a gourd. I mean, he's going to be, I don't know. I'm going to keep the colors kind of muted. Something like that. It's going to be kind of brown. And notice up here, so you can set in your brush settings your blend mode, right? So I'm going to set this to behind. And then it's going to composite all this stuff behind my actual content. So it's part of this gourd head layer, and I'm just colorizing it, right? Because inside of Fresco, I just brought it in as black and white. And I want to do this before we bring it into Adobe Animate. All right, that's pretty good for the head. Let's do the torso next, because that's another big one here. So select that torso, choose a color. For the rest of the corpse, I'm going to, I don't know, kind of like a bluish gray light white color. There we go. So we are filling him in nicely. And I'm being a little rough with it just because, you know, we want to get into Animate here. We don't want to stay in Photoshop. Photoshop's great, but if I want to rig this guy, Animate's the place to do it. Get his nasty old pelvis here. Very nice. And hopefully, let's see, what do we have here going on inside of Behance? So we got a good amount of people. Make sure to say hi. You know, it's never good to talk to yourself, even though I do it all the time. Let's go ahead and isolate that upper arm. So upper arm L, right there. Make sure that's the right one. This will be really easy to fill in. And again, I'm just brushing in my content here. And in case you're wondering, I am using a Intuos tablet and stylus, so it makes it a lot easier to, you know, draw things and paint inside of Photoshop when I do that. This is my upper arm L. I need to find my lower arm L. Here it is. Yeah, especially these days, Matt. He mentions as teachers, we talk to ourselves a lot. And for sure, because lots of times we're looking at just a black screen, right, of a bunch of different names when it comes to something like Zoom and so forth. I don't know. I have varying degrees of success getting students to, you know, keep their mics on and their video cameras on and so forth. And I don't necessarily think that students should always have their stuff on, but for certain activities, especially discussions, I think it's a good idea. If I'm just giving a demo lecture style, I don't really care if they have their cameras on or not, because nobody's getting anything out of it, right? It's not contributing. But it is hard when you're asking questions and nobody's responding. And I've had my camera on too, where everybody's got their cameras on, and I ask the questions and they're all just staring back at me, right? But that happens even when you're in person in a class. So I don't think we can blame Zoom for that one. That's just how people are. There's my hand left, hand right. That's what I want next. So again, you could do stuff like this in other ways, right? So I'm doing this inside of Photoshop before I bring my stuff into Animate. So all this was drawn out, sketched in Fresco on the iPad. And what I'm doing now is just making sure, prepping it for Animate. So I can rig this guy up and start moving him around. And yeah, Photoshop just seems like the best choice, at least for a character like this, especially since it's coming from Fresco already. And I'm going to have to run it through Photoshop because Animate, you know, can import PSD documents, which we'll see shortly. So what I'm most curious about in terms of, that's the wrong arm. Careful, Joseph. What I'm most curious about in terms of this character and this project that I'm doing with this character is, you know, this is a part 2 right now. I kind of wonder if we're going to have a part 3. If I get tired of working on this today, we may have a part 3 next week where we finish up. It all depends on how we're doing. Upper arm right. Yeah, now I'm really glad that I actually named all these things when I first brought it in, because it is making it quite a bit more easy to identify these different pieces of his body, or her body. You can't really tell, I suppose. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put a little of this shading, of this blue shading on his gourd head too, just to kind of unify it a little bit. Let's especially around the edges here. And let's change this. Multiply, take the opacity down. Just give him a little bit more bluish tint around his disgusting mouth and his weird eyes and everything. I mean, he is a gourd, but he does have a human body, so there we go. All right, that's pretty good. Set that back to behind. Nope, not clear. Behind. And we still got the legs to go through. And Matt's asking, when bringing files from other Adobe programs to animate, which has been my most go-to? I don't know. I mean, probably Capture. You know, Adobe Capture for mobile. But, you know, I do use Photoshop and Illustrator quite a bit too. So, I'm just quite not sure between the two of those, Photoshop and Illustrator, which would be my most used. Illustrator is nice because when you bring stuff in to animate from Illustrator, you can retain all that, the nice vector aspects of everything, right? But Photoshop's nice to bring in too, like this, because you get all these nice kind of textures and everything, which I like clean vectors, but I also like expressive textures. So it depends on the project. And yeah, I like how dark those bones get right there. That looks really good to me. Let's undo that a bit because I kind of overshot. There we go. And we got the lower legs and the feet left. So these are pretty easy. There's that guy. Lower leg right. You know, I think there's going to be a part 3 to this. Just because this portion, the colorization, is taking longer than I expected, which is fine. It's still fun to do, and it's still necessary. We go right foot and left foot, so let's go, buddy. I don't know, it might be okay, because we're at 219. We might be okay. This might be good. You know what I should do? I should save this. Once I rig this guy up, I should save him off as an Animate asset, which is a newer feature in Adobe Animate, which allows you to, you know, create different asset types and share them with people, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I like Capture a lot. I always showcase Capture for different things inside of, you know, from my classes. I think it's really important for the students to understand that they can use that to, you know, bring stuff in from so many different, you know, real world places and bring it into things. So we just, in my large class that I teach, we just got through Adobe Dimension this week. And, you know, we saw how to bring in real world materials with Adobe Capture and then apply them to models through Dimension, which works out like really, really, really nice. I am a big fan of Adobe Capture. I think it's Adobe's best mobile application. All right, so I got this guy. He's a PSD file. We can see him right here. Creeper work in progress, PSD. There he is. He's all colorized, and he's a madman. So let's go ahead and bring him into Animate. Now I've also brought in, I wanted something for a background, and I didn't want to paint the background myself or draw the background myself. So I actually grabbed this from Adobe Stock's free collection. So I think, yeah, it was last week, right before Max. You know, they announced that they had they were making a collection of assets be free on Adobe Stock, which is really cool. And actually, I've got, there we go. So all you got to do is inside of Adobe Stock, if you're looking for free stuff, there's actually a free category here when you search. So I looked for woods. You could look for, you know, pumpkin. There we go. And you'll get all sorts of free pumpkin assets, right? So Adobe Stock's always great, but of course it does cost points to, cost money to actually license these things. And there's a collection that, you know, you can use for free now, which is pretty cool, especially for students, right? All right. So we got this guy. He's fully colorized. I have renamed every one of his little layers appropriately. And let's go ahead and quit out of Photoshop. We don't need Photoshop anymore. We're using Photoshop as a sort of bridge between Adobe Fresco and Adobe Animate, because we have to transfer our cloud-based Fresco document through Photoshop to something that we can bring easily into Animate. And as we just saw, we're able to actually go through and colorize and properly organize our layers and so forth. So for this item here, my animation, I'm going to just use one of the presets here. I'm just going to use HD as my preset. So HD, let's go ahead and fit that in window. By default, it's really white. It looks like I'm looking at Adobe XD here, which definitely should have had a dark UI released at Adobe Max. It's very sad that it did not. Oh. Yeah. Yay, Catalina. Let's go ahead and... yeah. So I'm going to do this on my other screen, so... Oh, it's okay. I can use my Touch ID to do that. So you don't have to see my password. That's cool. As long as it... Oh, nope. It didn't recognize my fingerprint because it never does. Let's see. What's my password? I have to give Animate privileges. There we go. So I'm going to say, yes, you can... Animate can use accessibility features. That's great. There we go. Perfect. And for the stage, let's make it kind of a orange, just as a base. Yeah, that's going to work out. Okay. So, keeping an eye on what's going on in the stream itself. Perfect. Looks like everything's going really well in terms of the technical bits and pieces of the stream. So, we got this empty document. I want to go ahead and... Hey, guy. Cancel. Did not mean to do that. I want to go ahead and import my image here. So I'm going to choose Finder. And all you need to do to import a JPEG like this, or a PNG file, or whatever, is just drag it directly onto the Animate stage. And it's going to import that item. It'll import it into the library, so you can use it as much as you want. And it'll also put an instance on the stage. And I am going to try to figure out... There we go. That's pretty good. 75%. So I need to make this guy a bit smaller. I'm using my free transform tool here inside of Animate. There we go. Here's our kind of spooky woods. And actually, maybe I'll just keep it like this. We don't really need the rest of it, right? I'm going to rename this layer to BG for background, or maybe I'll call it woods. That makes sense. Lock it down. Actually, before I lock it down, let's actually do some things to this. So with my actual bitmap image here, you can't do a lot to it inside of Animate. You can see here, we could like swap it out with something else. We could adjust its properties, trace it into vectors, whatever. But we can also convert this to a symbol. So if we convert this bitmap to a symbol, we can do a bunch of other stuff to it. So what I want to do is I want to darken this up a bit, make it even more spooky. So I'm going to convert it to a symbol. I'm going to call this woods. It's going to be a movie clip symbol. It's the most powerful symbol in terms of different filters and, you know, color effects and things like that you can put on a symbol type, movie clip. And automatically we get a bunch of additional stuff here now that it is a movie clip symbol. Let's go ahead and save this too, just in case. I'm going to call this Creeper. I don't know why. That's a stupid name, but it's fine, I guess. Save it to my downloads. And this is going to be an animate document, FLA. That's perfect. Save. Now, if it crashes, we're not going to have, you know, tears over it, right? So notice that now that I've got this as a movie clip symbol, I've got color effects. I can change the brightness, which is exactly what I want. Let's take that brightness down. Make it real spooky. Yeah, that's good. We'll get the little path in there. So we can go to advanced as well and adjust all this stuff, but I'm going to keep it at brightness, and yeah, it's fine. Let's go ahead and lock that down. And the next thing I want to do is actually import our PSD file. So for that, I'm going to go File, Import, and I can't import to stage unless I have an unlocked layer. So I create a new layer here. File, Import. Import to stage is now active. And here's my Creeper work in progress. This is the colorized version, and you can see it's a .psd file. Let's go ahead and open that up. And it's gonna bring up our import dialog here. Now there's a lot of different things that we can do here. One of the things that I'm gonna do is actually convert every one of these to a movie clip symbol. So that little checkbox there, if I select each layer, and you can see the layer names from Photoshop come in perfectly, just as I had them. And they're each going to be a movie clip symbol, which is going to be perfect for rigging. And what I'm going to do here is also change my compression. Let's select them all again. And I want to change my compression to lossless because I don't want my beautiful gourd-headed monster to get little JPEG artifacts or anything like that when I publish them. So let's keep that at lossless. The other important thing is, what are we going to convert these layers to? So right now they're Photoshop layers, and we can convert them into animate layers. So we would have all of those layers as animate layers, or we can convert them all to a single animate layer or a series of keyframes. If we do keyframes, it'll place each layer on a keyframe moving forward, however many layers there are. And if we do a single layer, which is what I'm going to choose here, it's just going to dump all these movie clip symbols that it brings in from my PSD as a bunch of stuff inside of a layer, which again is perfect for rigging an armature with IK and bones. So I'm going to place my objects at their original position, and that should be good. Let's go ahead and hit import. And notice we've got our new layer here, but everything's kind of off to the side. There he is. But he's way big too, right? So let's go ahead and, excuse me, zoom out to 25%, turn off clipping, and he looks really good inside of Animate. Now notice, even though in the previews and inside of the Photoshop document and things like that, it actually showed each piece being part of a big artboard, right, from Photoshop, that when it comes in, it's only taking the pixel data when it comes in. So each one of these objects is perfectly trimmed and sized for what I'm gonna do next when I go through and rig this guy up. But before I do that, let's go ahead and with all of these different objects selected, choose our free transform tool. I'm gonna hold down my shift key and just pull this down until it's an appropriate size for my scene. There we go. Much better. Gosh, he looks like a giant. That's really scary. All right, I'm gonna start him out like right there. Or maybe just creeping out to the side, right? We don't want him on the path directly. So if I choose my selection tool again, if I click on any of these objects, we can see that these are all movie clips because I told the importer to translate every one of these things into movie clip symbols, right? So it's packaged them all up in movie clips, which means inside of my library here, I've got a folder full of little movie clip symbols that consist of my creeper guy's body parts, which is fun. And what we're gonna do now is actually create our rig with IK. So let's have a look here. So I've got my creeper and I've got my bone tool right here. Now by default, the bone tool is usually hidden. So you're gonna have to edit toolbar to access your bone tool and just pull him off into the tools panel here. And then select your bone. And one thing I always do when I am rigging is I will go to view, snapping, and I want to edit my snapping. I want to turn all my snapping completely off. Because if you don't do this, it's going to try to snap your bones to different things. And because we are using something that's very organic and fluid, you know, it's a corpse, right? It's like different body parts. So like it doesn't align to any specific grid system or anything like that. We don't want it to snap. So I turn it all off, which is weird because like for any other type of project, I like to turn snapping like on full strength, right? So at this point, we need to decide how we are going to, create this guy here. And actually, one thing I am going to do is I'm going to modify his torso a bit. When I created his torso, I created it as a single entity. So the torso and the pelvis are the same. If I double click, I can go inside here and see how that works. But what I want to do is I want to separate the pelvis. So I'm going to use my lasso tool. And of course, you could do this inside of Photoshop as well if you wanted to. And this is a bitmap. So I'm going to right click here and choose break apart. That's going to break my bitmap apart into a shape. And from here, I can just lasso up all these disgusting bits here. Right? Then I do a Command or Control X to remove them. Go back out to scene 1. Gosh, that's awful. Let's see. Let's go ahead and paste that. And I'm going to convert that into a movie clip symbol as well. Pelvis. There we go. Now I got my pelvis. I just need to use my free transform tool to get him to an appropriate size. That's too big. That's pretty good. And I also want it to overlap a little bit because when he moves around, I don't want like a gap to show up inside of his abdomen here. I want it to stay nice and together. So yeah. Let's see here. Check in the chat. I don't see anything new. But if anybody does have any comments on this or, you know, wants to talk about Animate, Fresco, Photoshop, all the stuff we're using here, I welcome the conversation. All right. So let's have a look. What we're going to do is go back to our bone tool now. Now, again, all this stuff exists inside a single layer. I can actually remove that layer too. So we have our woods layer and we have our creeper layer. Now, once I go through and I start actually creating these different bones, what is going to happen is he is going to be translated into an armature and an armature layer. And that's going to create an additional layer again, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is from his breastbone here, I'm just going to kind of click and drag down to the pelvis. There we go. So at this point, you can see down here, I've got a special armature layer, and the torso and the pelvis are actually connected, which is pretty cool. You'll notice that this first bone that I create has this sort of like diamond. It's a white diamond with a red outline. This indicates that this is the root bone, the root node to my rig. So I can pull other bones out from here. So to his head. Now his head's connected. To the shoulders. To the forearms or the elbows. And that one did not take. So I gotta... And we can make adjustments to these later as well. But the idea here is you are... He really doesn't want that. So, something you can always do if things are going kind of wrong is you can choose different items. All right, that's him. I don't know why he's got like... I don't know why he's so big. I'm gonna actually put my armature down here so that everything else is sort of like in front. Yeah, that's working a lot better. Just pulling out those different bones. Oops, I just created a new one, which I did not mean to do, so I undo that. And it might help if I zoom in a little bit too. Let's go 400%. I don't know why it's doing this. Look at that. It wants to create an entirely new rig for that, which I don't want. So if you ever want to test your rig, and actually, let's go back here. Oh, that's interesting. It actually did not connect to my pelvis. That's really weird. I wonder why that is. Oh, look at that. It actually connected to that, which is not good. Oh, it is connected to my pelvis. There we go. So you can see the pelvis swing. Sometimes it's hard to rig stuff. Rigging is not the simplest thing in the world to do, right? So it looks like what we have here is because we have this extra stuff, and this is my goof. So when I created this object, I've got a little extra stuff here, right? Let's go ahead and break that apart. And I am going to just completely remove that from it. There we go. Let's put that leg bone back. Very nice. All right, so perhaps now we'll be able to continue on with our rigging. There we go. Perfect. So you can see the rigging process, if you've never done it before, is pretty easy. You're basically just drawing out these different little bones, just connecting other bones at different joints. But you can actually get pretty involved with some of this. As we'll see in a moment, there are additional things you can do. All right, so my rig is actually complete. You can see my other layer just completely disappeared all on its own, which is actually a new feature. What we're gonna do, let's go to Fit in Window. So we can see the entire rig here. And what we're able to do now that we've established an armature is we can set the different poses. So if I choose his hand and I move it like this, you can see that the hand actually shifts and moves as I want. However, let's go in like 200% here. You can see the shoulder has completely dislocated, which isn't what we want. So as mentioned, there are a few additional things we're going to need to do to this rig to make it a bit more lifelike. We need it to be more rigid, like an actual skeleton. So one thing I'm going to do is go through here, and this bone right here, you can select any of these bones. Right now, we've got rotation on, which means it can go wherever it wants. I'm going to turn that off. And with that off, now if I move this object, you can see it's that bone stays exactly like it should. Now there's some other stuff here too that's a little wonky. So I'm gonna make some additional changes here and there. And one of those things I need to do, let's redo this bone entirely. Because I goofed on both of these guys. So I'm going to choose my bone tool again. Let's make sure I get that just right. Well, he doesn't want to do it. I'm going to just undo. Undo is such a friend. All right, so other things to think about. If you look here, the head can go all weird too. And actually, the head needs to go in front, I think, of the rest of the body. So you can always right-click on items that you need to show up in front and say Arrange, Bring to Front. And there we go. Now it's in front of the body. However, I want the head to only move like a little bit. So what you can do for that is actually set constraints upon your objects, upon your bones. So this bone right here, there we go. Highlighted in green. I'm gonna have a constraint on here. And you can see by default, it's like -45 to 45. It's very small. So if I try this out now, it's, it's still a bit much. Let's go ahead and tweak that some more. Another thing that's going on here, my pelvis. You can see it's sort of going all over the place. Let's go ahead and pin this initial bone here. Here's the pin option right here. So you can see pin the tail of the selected bones to the stage. So when you do that, it oftentimes will actually help with some of that floatiness that you get from an armature, where you're moving stuff around and it's just not, you know, it's just like completely shifting, like it's some kind of weird like marionette. That's not what you want. It's not the look that you're going for, right? So now I can change things as we go here. And notice right there, we're also going to need on this bone and also that bone to turn off joint rotation. We do not want those joints to rotate. There we go. For these, we do want some constraints on here. And again, you can look at these little guides. It's super, super small. This might help. So you got this little guide right here. It shows you the degree of movement that's allowed by the constraint. So something like that you can think of for a leg. Let's do the same thing here. Constrain that joint. So yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell as we're going through here bit by bit that, you know, this is a very, very, I don't want to call it a boring process or a menial process, but it's definitely a process, right? There's a lot of configuration, a lot of setup for these things. You can see here I am changing the constraints on the ankle joint so that his legs cannot go like, here we go. So that's nice, right? He can kick and his leg will stop at the knee joint. And he can still go like that, right? Pretty good. And the feet will just do whatever they want. You can always add like additional objects outside the feet if you want to control them and make those objects invisible. But I'm not going to do that here. Let's see, for the arms, they definitely need some constraints placed on them. I do wish that Adobe would make these indicators quite a bit bigger than they are currently. Because right now they're very, very small. They're hard to see. And the other constraints over here. Just to make sure all these bones kind of behave themselves. All these joints. That they don't do anything too unnatural. And I think that's pretty good. Oh, we might want to do the pelvis. Let's see here. Well, those are actually fine. They have their Thought I turned that off on each one. I guess I didn't. Oh, there we go. Yeah. All right. So if I select him, that's basically our rig. And we can see that skeleton right there. Let's have a look at how things are going with the stream. They're going okay. And if we want to make him walk, right? So let's take this all to like the 2-second marker. I'm going to insert some frames here. Right now, there's nothing going on. The way that armatures work is they use special keyframes called poses. And the way poses work is that they're basically keyframes for armatures. So if and it works like a motion tween more than a classic tween or a shape tween. So if I go and, maybe I just want to copy this pose. So I can select it. I can right click and say copy pose. You get a special menu when you're doing armature work. And I want to have him hold for like 10 seconds. So right here, I'm going to right click and say paste pose. So he's going to hold his current pose right here. Or, you could have him move a little bit. Like maybe I want to just like, oh, and I don't have him pinned correctly, do I? That's not good. So you can see how he's floating around all over the place. Let's actually go through and create an invisible element. This is sometimes a good way to fix things like this. And all you need to do is just create something that's like, it doesn't matter what kind of color it is, right? So if I create something like that, put it down here. Oops. And let's do a convert to symbol. I'm going to call this, I don't know, pin board. There he is. So now something I can do with my bone tool. I should be able to grab that and just pin it right there. And with that actually set there, I can choose to pin that to that. So now, as I move things around, oh, his feet are all weird. I'm gonna hold down. So if you hold down your shift key as a modifier, you can just rotate the different bones, the different visual assets, without actually moving all of the bones all the way up the thing. So that's pretty useful. So I'm gonna actually make this invisible now. Right now it's completely visible. So I want to change the opacity, color effects, alpha, and take it down to 0. There. So now he's pinned to that thing, to the ground, but we're never going to actually see it, right? So maybe what I want to do is just sort of have him initially be sort of like hunched over and then he stands up. That might be kind of creepy. So if I take his torso, and did I pin his torso? Yes, I did. Let's unpin that. Oh gosh. So I goofed my skeleton up somehow. That's still pinned. That's good. Well, let's just go ahead. We're getting close to the hour. Oh, hey, Kagan. How are you? Welcome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of create a couple of small poses here. And maybe we'll have a part 3 where we go through and make him do some additional stuff. Figure the bones out a little bit better. But I'm going to have him kind of like, I don't know. Let's have him start out just sort of, oh my gosh. I've got this skeleton all messed up. You know what I should have done? Well, it's too late for that now. So I'm going to put his arms down by his side here. Oops, not the leg. Not the leg. Nope. I'm going to shift his legs a little bit, though. I think it's always good to kind of shift things a little bit, even if they're not necessarily like the focus of the movement. Just to kind of shift them a little tiny bit. Let's zoom in on this because I'm way too far out right now. All right, that's fine. Then we go to this pose here. And I've goofed up that too, so that's unfortunate, but let's have him actually like just kind of lurch out a bit. So, Animate will automatically tween between poses. So you can see here. And I'm having a bunch of stuff going on, so let's actually, it doesn't make sense for his legs to like do the sort of weird shit that they're doing. Sorry. Well, there's a beginning. It is nearly 1 o'clock, so I'm going to stop the stream here, and we'll actually do a part 3 on this. I'm going to fix up this rig a bit more in part 3, and we'll actually make him sort of shamble across the road from one side to the other. And you know what might be cool too? I'm thinking like, if we make this actually part of the foreground, he could come out from behind the tree right there. And that'd be pretty cool. That's a really good idea. Before we go, let's do that. And to do that, there's a couple ways to do it. Well, I won't do it. I will do that in part 3 because it's a little bit more involved depending on what we do. We could always replicate the background and make part of it the foreground and then he comes in from between. Or we could mask out our armature layer and have him wander in and it would look the same. I need to think about it a little bit. Exactly what I want to do. So I guess we will have a part 3 for this. And I'll probably be doing that at night. Because, I don't know. I switched to daytime thinking, you know, it might be a little better, but I don't know. I'm thinking night works out better for me. So I'm probably gonna switch for part 3. Anyhow, in part 3, what we're gonna do, at least my plan right now, we're gonna fix up our rig because we did a couple little mistakes in the rig. Fix it up, and what we'll do after that is we'll have him shamble out from behind the tree, cross the road. We'll publish it to, you know, Twitter or whatever, and also create a shareable asset from him. And I will let everybody know where to grab the asset. If they want to animate him yourselves, you could do so. I was kind of hoping to have that done before Halloween, but whatever. It's fine. Halloween can last a little longer this year since nobody can actually go out and do anything. So, perfect. I hope everybody's well. If you're watching the replay, thank you for watching the replay. If you join me live, thank you for doing so. And I'll see you all next week.